If, when you came in, you did not get 3 sheets of paper, I'm going to ask some people, if you need to lead some, please raise your hand. These are really critical this morning, so if you did not get 3 sheets of paper on the back table back there, maybe some guys can help. If you haven't, they'll come get them for you. And I am not going to be offended if you get up and get the sheets of paper either, but you will need those this morning. So if you know anything about me, if you've kind of heard me in these last 10 months or so that I've been preaching, you know a few things. I love Kansas City sports. Right? I love my family. I love good barbecue. I really just love everything Kansas City. It's kind of home a little bit, even though I grew up an hour from there. But that means that Monday night, I was up watching football. Right? I was up watching the Chiefs take on the Broncos, and to all you Broncos fans, I have felt your mourning and pain for years, and I'm going to laugh at it today. Because my favorite play was what most people loved that day, when Von Miller is chasing Patrick Mahomes, and he rolls out to his left, which is the wrong way for him. He loves going to the right, and he's rolling out to the left, and Von Miller's grabbing his ankles, about to sack him, and he shifts the ball from his right hand to his left hand, which is unheard of, and shot puts the ball in the ugliest pass in the NFL ever, and somehow Tyreek Hill is able to throw up the peace sign and get the first down. And guess what I did? I yelled. I was excited. And Robin, in that moment, said, "You have 2 little girls asleep." I'm like, "Oh, yeah." And I'm going to wake them up. Man, I was excited. I was excited that day. Or how about the scene in the movie Elf? You know, Will Ferrell is 6'5", dressed up as an elf, which is awesome. And he has just gone on a date, and he's coming back to his dad's office. He's like, "I'm in love! I'm in love!" And I don't care who knows it. Because he wants everybody to know that he's excited in that moment. Do you ever have moments like that when you just want to shout because you are so excited about what is happening in your life? Or maybe you're not really a shouting person, you don't really yell. Maybe you're like me, and if something's exciting going on, you just talk about it so much that people are like, "Yeah, we've heard you say that 100 times, stop." Right? That happens. What is it in your life that you get so excited about that it brings that emotion that you just want to yell, you want to talk about it, you want to make sure that people know you are excited? What is that thing in your life that you just want to tell the world about? That play that puts you in amazement, that bonus check that you got at work, that your kid came to know Jesus and was baptized, that your friends came into town. I told everybody, we have friends in town this weekend, and I'm so excited. So it's been life-giving. But those moments that you just say, I cannot help but tell you that. I cannot help but say, God is doing something good. And it's good for my soul. You know, the past 5 weeks, this is actually our 5th week, we have spent time in the book of Psalms, specifically talking about the soul. Now, I don't know what it has done for you, but I know the last 5 weeks for me have been really healthy. They've stirred up this longing inside of me to just know God more. This depth in me to say, He's who I want. We started this series, actually, just kind of an overview. If the word soul is used 212 times in the Old Testament, 99 times are in the book of Psalms, or 97 in the book of Psalms. In these songs of the church, written out of emotion, written out of a language that we don't really speak very often anymore, this language of prayer, this language of authenticity, this language of vulnerability, this language of emotion toward God, going, I don't understand why this happened, or I'm so thankful that this happened. We tend to suppress those more than just follow that example and say, okay, God, I'm so thankful for you. But let me tell you what He has done for me. We started this series with this statement: the soul is the deepest part of man, the essence of life. And the deepest cry of the soul is to be found whole. But the soul can be found whole in God alone. Only Him. We began 3 weeks ago in Psalm 42, and we talked about despair. The sons of Korah, far from their homeland in Babylon, crying out, I just want to see the temple again. And we learned that in times of despair, we need to remember that God is near. The next week we're in Psalm 119, 129 through 136, just a section of that gigantic psalm. And we were talking about the importance of knowing the Word of God and putting it deep within us, knowing where He is leading. And we said this, we said that we must train our soul to long for the way of God. We have to train ourselves. Like, we can't just step into this and go, I'm going to follow God's path, if we don't know His path. We actually have to train ourselves to follow who He is. We have to teach ourselves that habit, that daily practice of knowing Him and following Him. Last week we were in Psalm 130, and we saw this amazing thing, how the psalmist moved from this incredible guilt in his life to realizing the forgiveness of God, and how God keeps no record of sins, to this waiting in hope of what God is creating him to be, and finally this redemption, and understanding in that redemption that He declares who God is, and that's what we're supposed to do. And the soul that knows its own redemption cannot help but share that redemption with others. It's kind of interesting. We were talking this week in a conversation about how this whole series has moved from despair to today, shouts of joy. And it's the whole thing is just moving. You go, okay, God, I don't get what you're doing, but we get to follow, and we're going to be a part of this, of what you're doing. And that's where we find ourselves today. In Psalm 66, in the black Bible in front of you, it's page 480 and 481. And if you do not own a Bible, take it with you. It's more important to us that you own a Bible, that you have one that you can read daily, than for us to have one in a chair. We can buy more. But take it with you. And today, the thing that we are looking at above all other things is that at the end of the day, we are to tell others what God has done for your soul. You, personally, are to tell others what God has done for your soul. That's part of our faith. That's the Great Commission. That's actually what we say as a church, where we strive to meet others where they live so they can know Jesus, connecting Christ to where you live. You tell others what He has done for your soul. And at the end of the day, as we walk out of here, I want you to have some practical ways that you can say, I'm going to tell others about Jesus. I just want to tell you what He has done for me. One thing, if you have already started looking through here in Psalm 66, you'll notice that it's this word Selah at the end. You may have heard it before. You may have seen it as, a group name in the Christian world or different things. What Selah is a pause. If you notice, this psalm was written to the choir master, which means it was meant to be sung in the temple. Selah works like a rest. It's a pause. It's actually meant and intended to be that time when you stop and you think about what you have just sung or read, and you reflect on it, and then you move on. And so when you are reading through Psalms in your own personal life, anytime you come across the word Selah, remember you are to pause and to reflect. And we're going to do that today. We're going to pause and reflect every time we come to a Selah. Let's begin. Verse 1. Shout for joy to God, all the earth. Sing the glory of His name. Give to Him glorious praise. What is it that causes you to shout for joy? Say to God, how awesome are your deeds. So great is your power that your enemies come cringing to you. All the earth worships you, and they sing praises to you. They sing praises to your name. So what's the first command we see here? The first aspect of this psalm is that we shout for joy to God. We shout for joy to Him because of the great things that He has done. Now, when sung, this psalm would actually remind the people, this is what you're to do. Shout for joy. I mean, look at what God has done in your life. Shout for joy. And who is to shout for joy? It says, all the earth is to shout for joy to God. If you're a follower of Jesus, then you are actually to shout for joy and tell Him the things. Like, tell people, God, you are so good. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Sing the glory of His name. Actually say, your name is amazing. There is glory there. It is glorious. It is beautiful. And then you're to say, how awesome are your deeds. And think about the deeds of God, the things that He has put in front of us. And in speaking of the greatness of God, right, and His glories, and we start to think of, man, here's where He's been great in my life. These are the things that He has done for me. And then it says this, the enemies of God come cringing before Him. This is a weird statement, right? Because I think of like somebody hunching before God going, I don't really want to be here, but I'm kind of forced to be. When I looked up this word this week, the word cringing, it's interesting because it actually means that the enemies of God are coming toward him to give him false worship and to deceive. Which means that in our midst, there could always be those who are coming to give false worship and deceive. But we're going to be those who honor God with true lips and true hearts. Shout for joy to our God. Enemies come cringing before him because they know his power. Trying to defeat it, but they still know his power. And we're going to see how God did remarkable things in this even. It's not to say that they come to worship God because of authenticity like we should, but because they come in a place, we come in a place of authentic worship because of the glory of God. We don't come cringing before him, but we come authentically to worship him. We're to sing the glory of his name. We're to remember the good deeds that he has done. It means this. Our praise should not be half-hearted or second best. When we come to God to shout before him, to say how awesome are your deeds, and all the earth worships him, we come before him with our best. And we give him all that we have. The end of the first 4 verses here, the psalmist cries out, right? He says this. He says, all the earth worships you and sings praises to your name. To you, they sing praises to your name. This over and over again, they sing praises to you. They tell of the glories of what you have done. And then there's this Selah. This pause. And so we're going to do the same. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take one of those pieces of paper, maybe the smallest, maybe the biggest, whichever one you want. I want you to take one of those pieces of paper that you have and set the other 2 to the side. Just set them to the side. You get them later. On that one piece of paper, I want you to look back over this psalm. This first 4 verses, shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth, give glory to his name, his glorious praise, and say to him, how awesome are your deeds, so great that your power, the enemies cringing before you, all the earth worships you. All the earth praises you. They sing praises to your name. They sing praises to your name. So here's what I want you to do. What are the things in your life that you can say, God, how awesome are your deeds? How awesome are your deeds? You don't have to write a full sentence. I just want you to write 2 or 3 words or things and just say, here are the awesome deeds that I know that God has done in me. That I know he's done in my life. Write them on one of those pieces of paper. You don't have to do it on all of them, but just actually don't do it on all of them. Just take one for now. The other 2 set aside. Write down. Here's the awesome things that God has done. Here's his awesome deeds. These are the things that I can think of. Things that point to his glory. Tell of the glories of his name. Do that for a moment, and then we'll move on. So he begins with this, shout for joy. And he moves in the next little section to this aspect of come and see. Come and see what God has done. Now something we need to understand about Psalm 66 is that it is a story of the history of Israel. And as we look at these next few verses, you're going to see why this is the case. He's called them all to come and worship, shout for joy because of what God has done. Now I want you to actually come and see what God has done. Come and see what God has done. Verse 5, he is awesome in his deeds toward the children of man. He turned the sea into dry land, and they passed through the river on foot. There did we rejoice in him, who rules by his might forever, whose eyes keep watch on the nations. Let not the rebellious exalt themselves. You know, there are times when it can be really hard to remember God's faithfulness as we worry about the future. And sometimes we need to remind ourselves, and telling others what God has done for us helps us to remind ourselves of what he's done. So maybe this is why the psalmist says, let me remind you of God's good deeds. Let me remind you of what he has done. How awesome he is in his deeds toward the children of man. It makes it personal. So the call is to come and see what God has done. So what has he done? Well, he turned the Red Sea into dry land, and a nation of 1 million people walked across. And they celebrated. And then, 40 years later, he turned the Jordan into dry land, and they walked across. And they celebrated. And they rejoiced. Because God rules by his might forever. He keeps an eye on the nations. And the rebellious really shouldn't exalt themselves before him. Come and see what God has done. Do you know what the Israelites did when they crossed the sea, when they crossed the Jordan? They celebrated. They shouted for joy. They sang of what God has done. They actually said, look at his mighty deeds. The horse and rider he has thrown into the sea because, well, the enemies of God came cringing, false worship, trying to attack his people, and they didn't survive because God did something else. And then as they're doing this, in this pattern here, you see this, they're going, come and see what God has done, and let's just not even try to exalt ourselves because it's pointless. Look what he's done. Yeah, the rebellious exalt themselves. You rebel against God, then you're exalting yourself. But he's done this. And it's that remembering what God has done. He's provided far beyond what we can imagine. Personally. Like I can look and I can go, you know, my family is incredible. I love my family. God has blessed our family, even through trial, like hard times. He's blessed our family. Robin and I have a marriage that is continually growing and shaping, and it's good, and it's hard, and it's beautiful all at the same time. And we have 4 kids that we love, and we'll all 4 be teenagers at some point in time, like together. All 4 will be teenagers at the same time. So you can pray for us because we love our kids. And yeah, they'll be teenagers. Which is still a blessing from God. I mean, that's beautiful, right? That he's blessed us here. I mean, he provided a place where we love to worship. It took us away from friends that we love dearly. But at the same time, in the midst of that pain, God said, I have something for you. A place that we love to be. We had an adoption 7 years ago. We're trying toward another. And in the midst of that, we're just seeing God go, I'm still here. And so we bless him. We honor him because of that. We bless him because God has done more for us than we could ever imagine. Our kids have accepted Jesus. They're pointing to him. They're trying to follow him. Oh, great. Man, that's huge. Look at what he's done. Come and see what he's done. And that's just me. And those are very physical things, but spiritually, man, God has healed me so many times over and continually to show me my sin and reveal where he wants to heal me next. And it's beautiful. And it hurts. But it's good because God has done more for me than I could ever imagine. And you know what he did? He saved me in Jesus Christ. And he gave his Spirit to live in me. And I get to say, come and see what God's done. Not perfect, but come and see what he's done. Because he continues to do more in me than I could ever imagine. And the same for you. And once again, Israel has come out. And the psalmist reminds the people of what he has done for them, what God has done for them. And he says, Selah. What has God done in your life? What has he done that you can just say, I get to see and remember, and those images, those things come to mind, and God has just done this. Come and see what God has done. If I could tell somebody else, come and see, what would I tell them to come and see that he has done in my life? Write a few of those things down, and then we'll move on. You know, at the end of the day, the goal is that you would tell others what God has done for your own soul. That's the goal. As we meet, we walk out today, that would be the goal, that you have practical ways to tell others what God has done for your soul. And I hope you're noticing that there's a pattern that we can follow from the psalmist think there really is just a pattern developing. Let me let you in a little bit on the secret here, because he starts with this. He says, shout for joy to God. Like, shout for joy. Like, let's just celebrate him. Let's celebrate who he is. And then I want you to come and see what God has done. Like, I'm going to personally shout. We are corporately going to shout. And then come and see what he has done. And then he says this. Let's just bless our God. Let's bless him. Starting in verse 8, he says this, bless our God, O peoples. Let the sound of his praise be heard, who has kept our soul among the living and has not let our feet slip. For you, O God, have done what? You have tested us. You have tried us as silver is tried. You brought us into the net, laid a crushing burden on our backs. You let men ride over our heads. Bless our God. We went through fire and through water, yet you have brought us out to a place of abundance. You've tested us like silver. The only way to test silver and make sure silver works is to put it in a really hot fire. Purify it. So that's why we bless God. We bless God because he brought us into the net. He caught us like a fish and laid a crushing burden on our backs. Because he let men ride over our heads. But we bless God. That makes sense? Before all that, he says, let the sound of his praise be heard. Bless our God. Let the sound of his praise be heard, because he has kept our soul among the living and not let our feet slip. That's pretty cool. My soul's still here. I'm still surviving. I haven't slipped into sin, but there have been crushing burdens. He's tested us. He's tried us. He's let men ride over our heads. We went through fire and water, and it was painful, and we didn't like it. Yet, you have brought us out to a place of abundance. It was painful. Coming out of Egypt was painful. Egypt was painful. Crushing burdens. Yeah, they felt it. Walking through water, God took them through the water. They were tried, they were purified, just like we have to be at some point. The pain has to come out. We have to bless our God in the middle of it, no matter what we're going through. God still is there. In fact, the psalmist writes of the way in which God has brought his people out of slavery. That's really what this is. And then they bless God because of the abundance that he has brought them to. We bless God in the midst of pain. There's an old story about a wise man living in China, in one of China's vast frontiers. One day, for no apparent reason, a young man's horse ran away and was taken by nomads across the border. Everyone tried to offer consolation for the man's bad fortune, but his father, who was a wise man, said, "What makes you so sure this is not a blessing?" Months later, his horse returned, bringing with her a magnificent stallion. This time, everyone was full of congratulations for the son's good fortune. But now his father said, "What makes you so sure this isn't a disaster?" Their household was made richer by his fine horse. The son loved to ride the horse. But one day he fell off his horse and broke his hip. Once again, everyone offered their consolation for his bad luck. But his father said, "What makes you so sure this is not a blessing?" A year later, nomads invaded, and every able-bodied man was required to take up his bow and go into battle. The Chinese families living on the border lost 9 out of every 10 men who went to fight. Only because the son was lame did the father and son survive to take care of each other. Often, what appears to be success or a blessing is actually a terrible thing. But what appears to be a terrible event can turn out to be rich blessing. The psalmist is pointing out the way that God's people were crushed and yet delivered. That he finds a way to bless God despite the circumstances in which blessing God seems impossible. Yet, if we were to develop a biblical habit of seeing God, seeing the hand of God in all events, we can learn to bless him in all events. Annie F. Downs recently wrote a book called Remember God, and this is what she says. She says, life can be painful and beautiful at the exact same time. We bless God because of an understanding of who he is. We bless him because he's God regardless of the circumstance. And then we find out how. Now, something interesting before we move into verse 13 that I want you to notice. Look throughout the rest of the psalm. It's a shout for joy. Come and see what he's done. He's awesome in his deeds towards man. Bless our God, O peoples. And then suddenly in verse 13 you see I. There's a shift here that goes from the corporate worship to a very personal decision to bless God on your own. Instead of just coming corporately, instead of hiding in the shadows, the psalmist now says, this is what I will do. I will come into your house with burnt offerings. I will perform my vows to you, that which my lips uttered and my mouth promised when I was in trouble. How many times have we said, hey God, if you give me an A on the test, I will do this for you? Or if you help me out of this situation at work and help me meet that deadline, then I will always wake up at 5 a.m. and do a quiet time. And 2 days later, I wrote that. I will perform my vows to you, that which my lips uttered and my mouth promised when I was in trouble. I will offer to you burnt offerings of fattened animals with the smoke of the sacrifice of rams. I will make an offering of bulls and goats. Selah. What just happened? Now, before you go out and buy a fattened bull or a fattened calf, just remember, we don't have to do that anymore. That's not part of the new covenant. That is not part of how we worship. But we still bless God. We still honor him with our worship, however that looks. If that's in reading his word, if that's in our prayers, if that's in singing, if that's in communion together, offering, however we worship, we still bless God. You know, the Old Testament means of sacrifice were meant to be an atonement for sin. But Jesus became that atonement for us, that we don't actually have to sacrifice for sin. He did it for us. And we can come before him honestly and openly say, I need that forgiveness. That's the beauty of it. But if you were to bring the smallest bull of your livestock, or the weakest lamb that you had, your sacrifice would not be honored. It would not be accepted by God, because God calls us to bring our best to him in worship. If we come to him half-heartedly, we're not bringing our best. And that's what he's saying. I will bring the fattened animal. I'll bring my best. I'll come to your house with burnt offerings, and I will offer my vows before you. I'll actually do what I say. I'll make an offering of bulls and goats and whatever it takes, because I'm going to bring you my best. Because look how you blessed me, even in the midst of pain. Even when it didn't seem like you were blessing me, God, you actually were. You were doing something amazing. And so I'm going to bless my God, but then you know what else? I'm going to actually come and see what he is doing. We sing to bless God. We serve to bless God. We give our finances to him as a blessing. We promise. No matter what circumstances we find ourselves in, we must learn to bless God. We need to let others know what he's done in our life. We need to shout for joy because of his awesome deeds. Even in times of distress, God is feeding your soul. But you have to remember to look to him. So here's what I want you to write down. When were those times in your life that it seemed like God was not blessing you and you really didn't want to bless him? Those times when life was the hardest, when it was painful, and yet on the other side you can see that it really was good. God really was good and kind. Take a moment and write those down.
fear God, and I will tell you what he has done for my soul. I cried to him with my mouth, and high praise was on my tongue. If I had cherished iniquity in my heart, the Lord would not have listened. But truly God has listened, and he has attended to the voice of my prayer. Come and hear what God has done for my soul. Faith is personal. We worship corporately, but quite honestly, all of that is built out of faith that is very personal and lives very personal. And where the deeds that God had done for a nation, crossing the sea, and it's easy to go, come and see this. Come and see. Let me stir up that imagination so you can see that picture in your head. Come and see what he has done here. Of course, shouting to him, we come and see, we bless God, but then come and hear what he's done for my soul. You see it, but you also hear it. He's calling others who fear God to hear what God has done for him personally. He's urging those who have joined him in worship to listen to his testimony. Like, this is what God has done for me. Let me tell you about him. The goal is to encourage others by letting them see what God has done. And then he points out that God listened to my prayer. I cried out with my mouth. God listened. I praised him with my tongue. God listened. Why? Why did God listen? Because the psalmist says, I didn't cherish my sin. I didn't hold on to my sin so tightly that I couldn't release it and go to God. I didn't cherish it. I honored him. I praised him. I worshiped him. Our lives must be lived in such a way that God hears our prayers, because we're not holding on to sin. We're not holding on to those things that are keeping us from him, but we are actually honoring him. If you're wondering sometimes why God isn't listening to your prayers, or it just feels like you're completely distant to him, sometimes that's okay, but there are also times when, guess what, we're living in sin, and coming to God honestly and openly is difficult. So maybe the first thing we need to do is say, God, just eradicate sin from my life. Dig it out. Show me those things that are not honoring to you, so that I can worship you freely and openly. Seek the Lord. Surrender to him, that you may be healed. And finally, the psalmist brings us back in verse 20 to the very thing we've seen all along. And he says this, he says, blessed be God, because he has not rejected my prayer or removed his steadfast love from me. He chooses to bless God because his prayer has been accepted. So he decides to say this, blessed be God. Just blessed be God. It's a weird grammatical term. We kind of miss it sometimes, but it's this idea that, you know what, no matter what is happening in my life, blessed be God. No matter where I am, no matter what the circumstances, blessed be God. I can see where he's moved. I can see what he has done, and I'm going to bless him. Did you catch the pattern of this psalm? I want to show it to you. Steve's going to throw it up on the screen here for us. I want to show you this because it's so fascinating that he starts with this, I'm going to shout to God, right? And then I want you to come and hear about it. And then I'm going to bless our God together, and then I want you to come and hear. Like, come and see, then come and hear. And now I'm just going to shout out, blessed be God. Do you see this pattern? See how easy this is in our lives? Like, here, I'm going to shout to God, and then come and see what he's done. Come and see what he's done corporately for us. Now I'm going to just shout our blessings to God. We together will bless our God, and then we're going to come and hear what he's done personally for my soul, for your soul. And then we just say, blessed be God. And out of all of that, we tell others what God has done. And you tell others what God has done for your soul. How he has made you whole, or he is making you whole. So we're going to wrap up here in a moment, but this is what I want you to do. I want you to look at those things that you've written down online. Those things that you have seen, the places where God has moved in your life, those situations and things that it may not have seemed like he was there, but you can say he was there. Those things that you've written down to bless him, and I want you to take that, and I want you to write 1 or 2 sentences, maybe 3 if you're wordy, on another sheet. 1 or 2 actually makes this available to put on Twitter later. 140 characters. If you had 140 characters to tell people what God has done for your soul, what would you say? I want you to write it down. I want you to write it on those cards. Those other two cards. Just one or two sentences. And in a few moments, I'm going to ask you to do something. I'm going to ask you to take those and put those on the wall. Just one of them. Because the other one I want you to keep. And I want you to hold on to it. And I want you to share it with somebody this week. Now that could be Facebook, or it could be Instagram, take a picture of it and send it. It could be Twitter. It could be somewhere where you're actually saying it. But I actually want you to take that and go to somebody and say, let me tell you what God has done for my soul. Let me tell you what he has done, the good things in my life, because so often we look at, I don't like this, and I don't like this, but let me tell you what God's done for me. Let me tell you how God has been faithful. Let me tell you about how he has blessed me. And out of that, I'm just going to bless him. Because the greatest thing I can do in my life is bless God. And I'm going to bless him by telling you about him. We are to tell others what he has done for our soul. So after you're done writing that sentence, in a few moments, this is what you're going to do. You're going to take one of those. And I just want you to hang it on the wall. You can see some from earlier. So that people can see this. We'll have some music playing in a little bit, and the band is going to lead us into worship in a little bit. But after you have posted that on the wall, there's 4 stations around the room. And I want you to remember what God has done. To remember not only the blessing in your life, but the way in which you're going to bless him, because really you're going to tell others what he's done for your soul, and you're just really blessing God because of it. But I want you to remember the sacrifice that he's made. I want you to remember that it's not just that we get to come and we're here in a room, but we actually get to go and tell the world about him. That is our biblical mandate, to go tell the world about him. That's what we follow. But we do it first because he died for us. Because the tomb is empty and our sin is forgiven. So declare what God has done for your soul. And then remember together in communion. And when you're done, we are going to declare together through song. We're going to remember who God is. I'm going to pray. The band's going to come up and play. And when you're ready, I want you to go post that. And I want you to take communion individually, as a family, however you want to do that, and remember what God has done. Father, I'm thankful that in these moments, and this time together, we can simply honor you. Knowing that there are things in life bigger than we can imagine, that you are constantly working behind the scenes, that you are teaching us of the goodness of your name. That you are great, and you are worthy to be praised, and you love us. And God, I pray in this place today that you would be the one we honor. That we would leave here wanting to tell others about you and tell them what you have done for our soul. That you are making us whole. That you are creating something new in us. And even though there have been really hard times, and we might still be in hard times, we can bless you. God, may the words of our mouth and the meditation of our hearts bring you honor and be pleasing in your sight. It's in your name we pray. Amen. When you're ready, you